The National Electrical Code, specifically NFPA 70 Article 110.26a, addresses working space around electrical equipment. This code section is crucial for ensuring the safety of personnel who may need to access and work on electrical equipment. The code states that working space around electrical equipment operating at 600 volts or less shall not be less than 3 feet wide in front of the panels and not less than 2 feet wide or deep at the sides and rear. This requirement applies to equipment such as power panel enclosures containing 480 volt service up to 200 amps, 480 volt panels with a main disconnect, 480 volt 3-phase variable frequency drives, overload relays, contactors, 120/240/480 volt 10 kV amps transformers, and 120 volt panels. Considering the voltage level of 480 volts, the enclosure falls under the purview of Article 110.26a. The National Electrical Code mandates a working space of at least 3 feet wide in front of the panel to provide adequate room for electricians and other qualified personnel to safely perform their tasks. If a handrail blocks the enclosure doors from opening, it may be considered a code violation under NFPA 70 Article 110.26a, as it does not provide the required 3 feet wide working space in front of the panel. This obstruction could impede access to the equipment for routine maintenance, troubleshooting, or emergency situations, such as a power outage. To address this potential code violation and ensure compliance with the NEC, several solutions can be considered. Firstly, relocate the handrail. The most straightforward solution is to move the handrail to a location that does not obstruct the enclosure doors from opening fully. This ensures that the required working space is maintained at all times. Secondly, provide alternative access. If relocating the handrail is not feasible due to space constraints or other design considerations, consider providing an alternative means of access to the enclosure. This could involve installing a removable or sliding door section in the handrail that allows personnel to access the enclosure without completely removing the handrail. This alternative access must still provide the minimum required working space of 3 feet wide in front of the panel. Thirdly, install warning signage. Post clear and visible signage indicating the location of the main disconnect and the importance of maintaining the required working space. This signage should be placed in a prominent location near the enclosure to remind personnel to keep the area clear of obstructions. Additionally, the signage should clearly state the voltage of the equipment and the potential hazards associated with working on or near it. The working space requirements specified in Article 110.26 are intended to protect personnel from electrical hazards such as shock and arc flash. Adequate working space allows electricians to safely operate and maintain electrical equipment, reducing the risk of accidents and injuries. It is important to note that the working space requirements apply to the front, sides, and rear of the equipment depending on the specific configuration and voltage level. In addition to the width and depth requirements, the working space must also be clear and unobstructed. This means that there should be no pipes, ducts, or other equipment located within the working space that could impede access to the electrical equipment. The working space should also be adequately illuminated to allow personnel to see clearly while working. Regular inspections should be conducted to ensure that the working space is maintained in a safe and accessible condition. Any obstructions or hazards should be promptly removed or corrected. It is also important to train personnel on the importance of maintaining the required working space and the potential hazards associated with working on or near electrical equipment. Training should cover the proper procedures for accessing and working on electrical equipment, as well as the use of personal protective equipment, or PPE, such as gloves, safety glasses, and arc flash suits. In the specific scenario described, the enclosure contains a variety of electrical components, including a 480 volt service up to 200 amps, a 480 volt panel with a main disconnect, a 480 volt 3-phase variable frequency drive, overload relays, contactors, a 120/240/480 volt 10 kV amps transformer, and a 120 volt panel. This equipment is typically used to control and distribute power to various loads in an industrial or commercial setting. The enclosure is approximately 4 feet wide, 6 feet high, and 1 foot deep, with dual-hinge doors. The size and configuration of the enclosure will influence the specific working space requirements. For example, if the enclosure is located in a confined space, it may be necessary to provide additional working space to allow personnel to safely maneuver around the equipment. The location of the main disconnect is also an important consideration. The main disconnect should be readily accessible and clearly labeled so that personnel can quickly de-energize the equipment in an emergency. The main disconnect should also be located outside of the working space to prevent personnel from having to reach into the working space to de-energize the equipment. In summary, maintaining the required working space around electrical equipment is essential for ensuring the safety of personnel and complying with the National Electrical Code. If a handrail or other obstruction is blocking access to the enclosure, it should be relocated or modified to provide the minimum required working space. Warning signage should be posted to remind personnel of the importance of maintaining the working space, and regular inspection should be conducted to ensure that the working space is kept clear and unobstructed. The NEC is not just a suggestion, it is a standard of safety. Electrical safety is paramount, and the NEC clearance rules are there to protect individuals. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, outlines specific requirements for electrical installations to ensure safety and proper functionality. One of the key aspects covered by the NEC is the clearance and working space around electrical equipment, including power panels and enclosures. These requirements are designed to provide sufficient room for electricians and other qualified personnel to safely install, maintain, and operate electrical equipment. Article 110.26 of the NEC addresses the requirements for working space about electrical equipment. This section specifies the minimum dimensions of the working space, including the width, depth, and height, depending on the voltage level and configuration of the equipment. The intent is to provide enough space for personnel to safely perform their tasks without being exposed to electrical hazards. For equipment operating at 600 volts or less, such as the 480-volt power panel enclosure, the NEC requires a minimum working space of 3 feet wide in front of the equipment. The depth of the working space depends on the voltage level and the presence of exposed live parts. In some cases, the NEC may require a larger working space to accommodate specific equipment or installation conditions. In addition to the width and depth requirements, the NEC also specifies the minimum height of the working space. The working space must be clear and unobstructed from the floor to a height of at least 6 feet 6 inches. This ensures that personnel can stand upright and move freely within the working space. The NEC also addresses the issue of access to electrical equipment. The code requires that all electrical equipment be readily accessible to qualified personnel. This means that the equipment must be located in a place where it can be easily reached and worked on without having to remove obstacles or climb over barriers. In the case of power panel enclosures, the NEC requires that the doors of the enclosure be able to open at least 90 degrees. This allows personnel to fully access the equipment inside the enclosure without having to struggle with partially open doors. If the enclosure doors are blocked by a handrail or other obstruction, it may be considered a violation of the NEC. In addition to the specific requirements for working space and access, the NEC also includes general requirements for electrical safety. These requirements cover a wide range of topics, including grounding, overcurrent protection, wiring methods, and equipment installation. The goal is to ensure that all electrical installations are designed and installed in a way that minimizes the risk of electrical shock, fire, and other hazards. The NEC is updated every 3 years to reflect changes in technology and industry practices. It is important for electricians and other qualified personnel to stay up to date on the latest version of the NEC to ensure that their work complies with the current standards. The NEC is a complex and comprehensive document, and it can be challenging to understand and apply all of the requirements. However, there are many resources available to help electricians and other qualified personnel stay informed and compliant. These resources include training courses, online forums, and publications from industry organizations. Compliance with the NEC is essential for ensuring the safety of electrical installations and the protection of personnel. By following the requirements of the NEC, electricians and other qualified personnel can help to prevent electrical accidents and ensure that electrical systems operate safely and reliably. In conclusion, the NEC provides detailed requirements for clearance and working space around electrical equipment, including power panels and enclosures. These requirements are designed to provide sufficient room for personnel to safely install, maintain, and operate electrical equipment. Compliance with the NEC is essential for ensuring the safety of electrical installations and the protection of personnel. When there is an issue of the handrail being in the way, there are 3 possible courses of action. 1. Relocate the handrail to another position where it is not blocking access. 2. Replace it with a removable guard or install a sliding door at the location so that it can be opened for access. 3. Provide signage that has a warning to provide the necessary awareness that there are electrical hazards involved. This could be temporary signage or permanent.